The story opens up with our boy, Licht Esterk, and his mother, bearing a disgusted look on her face, told him that he was an abomination to their family who could not even use magic, and he was not worthy of bearing the Esterk name. Hence, she declared that tomorrow, when he was going to turn 15, he would be exiled from their family. His sister, Ellen, standing beside him, spoke up on his behalf and questioned her what she meant by that. The mother made it crystal clear that he would be casted out from their family because now that a useless boy like him had turned 15, there was no reason to keep him there. Ellen argued that she should not be doing that, as there were other brothers that were still in the house as well, and most importantly, Licht was still her brother. Her mother reminded her that she should not call that boy her brother, as he was not even her real brother and was the son of a miller's daughter. Just then, there were a couple of maids who were just enjoying listening to all this family drama, but then Ellen stared at them with cold eyes and shut them up right away. Coming back to the point, she yet again argued that even though he might be an illegitimate child, there was also the fact that he shared her father's royal blood. Her mother agreed that she was indeed right, and only because of that reason, she had decided to conduct a proper exile ceremony for him as a final act of mercy. The ceremony was a tradition that had been upheld among the nobles for ages now, and especially because the Esterk family was a noble lineage that had laid the foundation of this entire kingdom. This ceremony had been held 5 times in the past to avoid leaving behind any inferior offspring. In other words, 5 others had been exiled from this family before him as well. However, if he still wanted to stay in this house, Licht had to pass the test of the exile ceremony and prove himself worthy of the Esterk name. Hearing all that, Ellen grew even more frustrated, but then he stopped her from saying anything mean to her mother and simply accepted the proposal laid down by her. With that, the two of them left the hall, and the mother did not like how unappealing his attitude was, just like always. The butler came up to her and asked her if it was really okay for her to make such an important decision while the master was away from the mansion, to which she answered that she was doing all this precisely because the master was not there. Meanwhile, Ellen was stomping through the hallways, frustrated and yelling out how she absolutely hated her mother. Licht, on the other hand, was simply smiling and told her that she should not be speaking ill of her mother like that. She questioned him why he accepted her proposal without saying anything back to her, and he reminded her that it was quite common for bastards like him to be thrown out of the house once they come of age. And besides, he also believed that he truly was useless and was tarnishing their family's name. But then suddenly, Ellen hugged him, and she started crying. She asked him if he really was okay with the two of them being separated like this. With a smile on his face, he patted her head and said that even after all this time, she had not changed at all. However, she believed otherwise and stated that she has changed, and more importantly, he has changed even more. She asked him if he still remembers the day when he first showed her his magic. Everyone said that he could not use magic, but when she saw him using it, she was very much surprised. Licht tried to cover it up and said that it was just her misunderstanding. However, she was sure as hell that she was not mistaken, because even after all this time, she remembered it like it was just yesterday. It was the day that changed her life completely. Cut to a flashback. Back when they were both just kids, Ellen was defeated by him, and she could not even begin to comprehend that since everyone used to call him a useless abomination. He noticed that she was bleeding a little, so he tried to help her out, but she shouted and told him not to even touch her. So he first apologized to her and clarified that he did not mean to hurt her in the first place. Turns out, she just wanted to take her frustration out on someone, and she saw that useless kid as a perfect punching bag who everyone looked down on. However, she ended up being countered by him. She was so ashamed of her foolish actions, she cried her eyes out in public for the very first time. But then Licht tried to calm her down, and that's when he used his magic in front of her. He made all these flowers that were around her fly up, which left her completely surprised. But that was not it. He placed those flower petals on her dress and made it look like it was made of flowers itself. Seeing that dress made of flowers, she was simply amazed, while he stated that the one who was truly beautiful were not the flowers, but herself. And so, coming back to the present, she expressed how ever since that day she had been admiring him a lot, while he just stood there, awkwardly, and did not know what to say to that. She asked him why he was hiding his true potential from everyone, even though he could use such powerful magic, and on top of that, his sword skills were also unmatched, even among the other Esterk brothers. That's why she just wanted to know why he always pretended to be useless. In response, Licht simply asked her how old she was turning this year, and that left her a bit confused. He then brought up that she was nearing an age where she would start getting marriage proposals soon. Hence, he wanted her to just forget about the person who was going to leave this house, and believed that she would be able to find a new person quickly anyways. However, with a serious tone, she questioned him why he would say something like that, and he was a bit taken aback. She started crying, saying that he was being too cruel, and ran away from there, while he, on the other hand, had no idea what just happened. Nonetheless, seeing the face that she made, he himself was surprised to see that he still had these feelings left within him even after all this time. But still, even though they both bore the Esterk name, he knew full well how different the two of them were, and that's why, even though he also felt bad about this, he understood that this was for the best. The fact remained that from the very beginning, they both lived in very different worlds. The next day, the scene shifted to the Esterk family's training grounds, and in the waiting room, there was Licht sitting there all by himself, holding a locket in his hand that had a picture of his real mother. Just then, someone knocked on his door and asked to come inside. It was Elin, and he expressed how glad he was to see her face there one last time, as he'd have thought that she would still be angry at him for what happened the other day. She looked around the room and commented that this room felt more like a prison where one would wait to pass away. She then confronted him and asked him if he was really planning today's test on purpose as well. The reason why she believed so was because ever since yesterday, he had been talking as if he had already decided to leave this house no matter what happens. She then took off his shirt, and confused, he asked her what she was trying to do there. In response, she brought up how in ancient Esterk, the practice of incest was quite rampant. However, he stopped her right there and reminded her that that was just an ancient story and was now prohibited by family rules. She just smiled at him and stated that he really was an amazing person. Just looking at him, she could also tell he had been training very hard, and she was quite certain of it as well, because after all, she had spent more time with him than anyone else. She strongly believed that he was the one who was destined to carry on the Esterk legacy. Licht simply chuckled, since it was not the first time she had said that to him, and he tried to brush it off just like every other time. He told her that he had no right to inherit even as a noble, but she argued that he actually does, and the proof of that was right there. He was born with the Esterk family crest etched on his shoulder. She showed him her emblem as well and explained to him that this emblem was the mark of a legitimate Esterk. That's why their mother could not cast him out all this time, because he had this emblem on him as well. So she turned around and requested him to cut this stupid act just for today. He simply remained silent, and that was enough for her to know that he was not going to listen to her. She could not understand why he was pretending to be useless even when he was not, but the one thing that she was sure of was that she did not want to be apart from him, and therefore she had decided to do everything she could and not let her mother have her way. Meanwhile, the others had gathered in the training grounds as well, and the second son, Marcus von Esterk, tossed his wine on the butler as he was beginning to lose his patience and questioned him when it was going to start. The eldest son, Frodo von Esterk, also pointed out that it was almost 11 o'clock and it should be starting soon, while their mother, Minerva von Esterk, was just giggling as she could not wait to see what would happen. Just then, Elin also arrived there, and her mother was quite surprised to see her there, as she had thought she would not be coming. She apologized to her and her brother for being late and stated that she was preparing just a little something that would keep everyone from being bored during this trial. Her mother grew rather suspicious and wondered what that might be. Finally, it was time for Licht to step outside, and once again, holding that locket in his hand, he was determined to face all those arrogant nobles out there who had mocked and belittled him and his brother. But more than anything, he was determined to take his revenge against the Esterks, and with that, he finally stepped in the ring. The moment he stepped outside, everyone present in the arena looked down on him, calling him the illegitimate son of Lord Stark, who was not worthy of a noble title. In the end, they all saw him as nothing but just an ordinary commoner like the rest. Licht, on the other hand, simply stood there, watching the massive crowd that had gathered there, and was surprised to see how big of an event his exile trial had become, where they had invited more than just a Stark's family and his loyal retainers. He also noticed that even the children of the serfs were present there as well, and he began to understand that Minerva really wanted to publicly announce his exile. With that said, Minerva ordered for the commencement of the exile trial, and she explained to him that his test was going to be very simple. It was a test to prove if he was worthy of the martial house of Stark. Just then, a dwarf and a troll appeared before him, and she once again reiterated that his trial was going to be settled with a duel. She gave him the option of selecting whichever opponent he wanted to face, and in response, Licht lifted his finger, pointing towards his brother, and said that he wished to duel with his brother. Marcus grew furious, and he shouted that a commoner like him, who could not even use magic in the first place, should not even dare to challenge a royalty like him. He looked at his mother, hoping she would say something as well, but she, on the other hand, was just giggling and was quite curious to see what exactly he was plotting by choosing such a difficult path for himself. So to find out what it was, she asked Marcus to show that bastard what it meant to be an Estark man, and he obeyed her command without arguing any further. He was ready to beat him up so bad, he would be begging for mercy. The spectators began discussing among themselves how the Estark family had always produced the chief court magicians, and now that a commoner who could not even use magic was going to fight an Estark, the people were certain that the outcome of this match had already been decided before the fight even started. Marcus stepped in the ring, and he started mocking Lit for making such a foolish decision. He told him that if he were to fight against a dwarf or a troll, he might have had a chance of winning this thing, but he had to go out of his way and challenge him. He questioned him if he even understood what a duel with nobility signified in the first place. The kingdom of Raklis was a magic kingdom where all the nobles possessed extremely high magical powers, unlike other commoners, and that's precisely why a battle with a noble meant that it would be a battle that involved magic, something that Licht could not use at all. Marcus advised him to choose his weapon wisely for this duel to compensate for his lack of magic. Licht noticed that his brother was going to be using a sword, so he considered using the same weapon as well. But just when he was about to make his pick, Ellen called him out and asked him to wait. She informed him that she had prepared a weapon specifically for him, and then one man came up to him, bringing a massive sword in front of him. That sword was none other than the divine sword, Turfing. The man could not even hold it properly, that's how heavy it was, while Aelin announced that she had a proposal for everyone present in that arena. She wanted to conduct a little prelude before the duel between those two brothers started. The divine sword Turfing was a very important artifact that was passed down in the Estark family for ages now, as it was said to be a holy blade that came from another world during mythological times. Those who did not have magic could not even touch the sword, and if Licht truly did not have any magic, he would not be able to touch it either. Hence, for the traditional exile trials prelude, she wanted to let the so-called useless one give it a try. Minerva also began to wonder what exactly she was trying to prove by doing something like this, which was not even necessary, while Aelin, in her mind, apologized to him for doing this. However, considering how he intended to lose this duel on purpose, she wanted him to show everyone that he really does have magic so that it could increase his chances of staying in the mansion. Since Licht wasn't really doing anything, Marcus went out of his way and grabbed the divine sword. Looking down on Licht, he stated that even though he has their father's blood in him, he should not even touch this divine sword, as it was something only true nobles like him could touch. He picked up the sword and kept rambling that a commoner like him had no right to even lay his hands on this sword. There were those who were able to pull this sword and actually use it, however, they were no longer in this world. Not only that, even their father, who was known as the prodigy of the Estarks, could not pull it out either, but one day Marcus was certain that he would claim this sword for himself. However, just then, the sword resisted him and sent him flying back. Marcus simply chuckled as he understood making that sword his own wouldn't be that easy, and it was near impossible, as throughout history there had only been one person who was able to pull it out, the first head of the Estarks, Brahms. It was quite the stubborn sword that refused to let anyone use it besides the first head, and even though the sword was right there, near Licht's feet, he did not want to hold it and decided to just wrap up the prelude right there. He went back to choosing his weapon, while Marcus also commented how dull and boring he was. Minerva as well was a bit underwhelmed, as she had thought she would witness something interesting from him for the first time, while Aelin, on the other hand, was really starting to get worried for him. She shouted out, requesting him to just take the divine sword, as she was certain he would definitely be able to touch it. However, he just looked at her, and in his mind, he was grateful that she was trying to help him stay in this family. But he knew that he could not meet her expectations that she had from him. The reason being, he had already decided to take down Marcus right there, right now. He had no intention of losing this duel against his brother, and by winning this thing, he was going to leave this house either way. Minerva laid down the rules, informing them that the duel would continue until one side admitted defeat, or until they could no longer fight, and with that said, the duel finally began. Marcus charged first, incanting a fire spell, and he launched a fireball spell right at him. Licht simply stood there as the fireball was coming his way, while Minerva was enjoying the show, when all of a sudden, he sliced that fireball with his sword like it was nothing, leaving everyone present in that arena completely stunned. They could not believe that he just sliced that spell with his sword, as they did not know if something like that was even possible, and more importantly, it was done by just an ordinary commoner who could not even use magic. Marcus questioned him what kind of tricks he was using, and he simply replied that because he still hadn't realized what was going on, that's precisely why he was so foolish. To put it in simple words for him to understand, he told him that he was just stronger than him, that's it. That really pissed off Marcus, but then, before he could even comprehend all this, Lick disappeared from his eyes, and in an instant he closed in on him and attacked him by using a fireball spell as well. He reminded him that this was a spell that works best when cast at a close range, and with that, he sent him flying back, which yet again left everyone shocked. Marcus could not even begin to understand what was happening and how he was able to cast magic without incantation, while Lick assured him that he did not need to worry because he was not going to kill him. He just wanted to humiliate him in front of a crowd, as he understood that a noble losing to a commoner must be more painful than death for a proud noble such as him. However, he also believed that it was still far lighter than the suffering his mother had to endure because of all of them. And so, pointing his sword right at his face, he told him that if he admitted defeat right there, he wouldn't hurt him any further. Even though he hated him a lot, he did not want to see his sister all sad, and only because of that he was ready to show him mercy. Just then, Ellen called him out and warned him to watch out as the troll was about to attack him from behind. Lick managed to block it just in time, but Minerva, on the other hand, shouted out to Marcus, telling him to use this opportunity and counterattack while his back was still wide open. She had this maniacal look in her eyes, and she just wanted to see Lick dead. While he was busy fending off the troll's attack, Marcus also could not accept that he lost to a commoner, and so he picked up his sword and prepared to attack him from behind. Lick turned around and tried to attack him with magic to knock him out for a moment. However, the dwarf also intervened and grabbed his arm, making him lose his aim, and using that chance, Marcus quickly closed in on him and slashed him with his sword, leaving everyone just shocked and at a loss for words. The dwarf and the troll stepped back, while his blood dripped from his body onto the ground, and near his feet was still the divine sword that was just dropped there. Marcus admitted that he was right and losing to a commoner was indeed more painful than death, so he had decided to kill him right there, and that's why he did not care if he wanted to blame him and call him a coward. Ellen begged her mother to stop Marcus, but obviously she, on the other hand, had been waiting for this precise moment, and she even encouraged him to finish him off. Lick simply dropped his sword, and he just stood there, waiting for his death. Marcus himself was confused, and he questioned him if he really believed that he wouldn't strike someone who did not have a weapon. He told him that this was his own fault for losing his fighting spirit in the middle of a battle, and if anything, he should curse his own ineptitude, while Ellen was shouting from afar, telling him not to give up so easily. With tears in her eyes, she requested him to just pick up the sword, and then all of a sudden, the divine sword started moving on its own, and it came right into Lick's hand, all by itself. The sword began speaking to him and said that it was not the time for him to die just yet. The spectators were stunned, and they could not even begin to comprehend how a commoner, who could not even use magic, was touching the divine sword. Minerva was equally shocked as well, since it looked like the divine sword flew by itself right into his hands, while Ellen was just glad to see that. Marcus questioned him once again what kind of trick he was using, as he should not even be able to touch the divine sword. He grew angry and demanded an answer from him, but he, on the other hand, was just as surprised as the rest of them as well. The sword continued to talk to him and commented how annoying that man in front of them was. Looking at him, she recalled that old saying which said that those who are weak bark the loudest, and he was a perfect example of that. She asked Lick why he had abandoned his sword and if he was really going to lose to such a pathetic man. His blood was still on the divine sword, and she could sense a strong magical power within his blood, which made her doubt that an ordinary warrior would be able to defeat him like that. He replied that he was not letting himself lose to Marcus. In reality, he felt like he had lost to this world. In a world where lineage and background were the only things that dictated a person's future, personal talent meant absolutely nothing, and he believed that, just like his mother, one person could not change fate. This world was just far too complex and cruel for that. That's why, all this time, he thought that if he wanted to win against them, he would need to be just as vile as these ugly nobles in front of him, and so he had been pretending to be useless just to avoid their attention. But now he was just really tired of pretending and lying to himself. Marcus, hearing all that, just stood there confused, and he questioned him why he was talking to himself. Licht was taken aback hearing that from him, and he wondered if Marcus could actually not hear the divine sword's voice, to which the sword responded that he can't. As a matter of fact, no one present there could hear her, and on top of that, she added that there had been others who could wield the divine sword in the past times. However, no one who could hear her had survived. She then brought back what he said earlier, that just one person could not change fate, and asked him if he still thought that was the case now that she was there with him. If he wanted to go ahead and die, she was not going to stop him from doing that, However, she could still feel his blood burning with life, and so she asked him if he was really okay with losing like this, without even trying to make a change. The divine sword could already feel his true feelings that he had within him, and with that, Licht was ready to use that sword. Just by looking into his eyes, she could tell what his motivation was, and so she asked him to use her to his will. He finally pulled out the divine sword, something that no one had been able to do for a very long time now, and everyone was completely shocked. Marcus started trembling as he refused to believe what he was seeing and kept telling himself that it must be just a bad dream, while Minerva and the others were also left frozen in place. As Licht lifted the divine sword in front of everyone, the spectators began muttering about how no one other than the first head of the family had ever drawn the divine sword, and they all were left with just one question: who exactly was this young man in front of them? The sword started radiating a bright light that made the dwarf tremble in fear, and seeing that, Marcus wondered if the beasts were actually afraid of the light that was coming from the divine sword. Meanwhile, Minerva was losing her mind, and she questioned her butler why this was happening, even though they had confirmed previously that Licht did not have any magical power. The butler brought out the magic scanner machine, and first, he checked Marcus, whose magical power was at 3333. But then he checked Licht's magical power, and he could not believe what he was seeing. His powers kept on rising and rising, which he was not expecting at all, until eventually, it showed that Licht's magical power was at 7777. Minerva refused to accept that, since she had never heard of such magical powers, while Aelin, in her mind, apologized to him in advance because she knew what she was about to do now was something that would annoy him a lot. Still, she shouted out to everyone present in that arena and told them that they were witnessing a historic moment right in front of their eyes. It was the return of a hero, and she branded Licht Estark as their real hero. Everyone started agreeing with her and called him a hero of their country, while he just stood there, getting really annoyed. He decided to just leave from there, and as he was going back, Marcus called him out, questioning him where he was going in the middle of a duel. He was not going to allow him to walk back home quietly after whatever trick he used to draw the divine sword, but then Licht turned around and stared at him with a deadly look in his eyes. Marcus himself got scared for a moment, while he stated that he was going to vanish from there, just like all of them wanted. He also warned him that if anyone even tried to follow him, he would show them no mercy at all and would slice them down with this divine sword. With that said, he left the ring and went back. However, as he was walking back, he was still bleeding from his wound, and just as he reached the exit, he thought to himself that he could finally be free, but at the same time, he was starting to lose consciousness as well. The divine sword asked him if he was alright, and he admitted he had not expected this duel to turn out like this. He only meant to humiliate the heir of Estark, but getting seriously wounded like this was not really part of his plan. He looked up in the sky and wondered if, in any way, he was able to avenge his mother's grudge. He fell down to the ground, slowly passing out, and in that moment, he felt as if he was laying down on his mother's lap, who was calling out to him. But in reality, it was Aelin, telling him not to die, and she begged for anyone to come and help her brother out. The next thing he knew, he woke up in his room, and he saw Aelin resting on a chair by his side. The divine sword was also right there in his room, and she was happy to see he had finally woken up. She informed him that he was out cold for 3 days, and then she officially addressed him as her new master. Licht asked her if all the divine swords could talk like her, and more importantly, he pointed out that for a sword that was thousands of years old, she surprisingly had quite a youthful voice. In response, she reminded him that she was not just any other sword, she had a magnificent name as well, Turfing, and stated that it was bad manners to ask a lady her age. Putting that aside, she also briefed him that while he was passed out, Aelin was the one who was continuously taking care of him, and for that, she suggested that he should thank her, as she was the one who stayed by his side and protected him. He simply smiled and patted Aelin on the head, while the divine sword got quite intrigued after seeing him make that face. She admitted that she was finding herself more and more curious about him. At first she was only interested in him because of his warrior blood, but now she was also curious to see exactly what kind of a man he would grow into. With that said, she asked him if he was still determined to leave this place. He replied that he actually was, since he did not really have any reason to stay there anymore, and although he understood that Aelin would feel lonely without him, this was something he just had to do, and he promised that he would keep writing her letters once he got settled down somewhere. Since that was the case, Turfing asked him to take her with him as well. Licht was not too sure about that because at the end, she was still the treasure of Estark, and he was certain they wouldn't let something like this slide so easily. However, she then informed him what really happened after he fell unconscious. Everyone who was present in that arena said that he was now the true owner of the divine sword, and no matter how much the nobles might try to keep quiet about it, they could not really silence the people's mouths completely. It was already widely known that the divine sword chooses its owner itself, and even a king could not change that. So now that everyone had witnessed him holding the sword, she assured him he did not need to worry about it. Besides, she also stated that he wouldn't be bored if he had her around him. He agreed that that was indeed true, and with that said, he decided to take her with him, hoping that they would be able to work together as real partners. From that day on, he decided to discard the Astark name and stepped into the outside world to face numerous formidable foes. By his side was the divine sword, and cutting ties with the ones who he once held close, he moved forward to make his own path. People began to call him the strongest, undefeated wielder of the divine sword. A few days passed ever since that incident, and the scene shifted to a ticket booth for shared carriage, which was located just northwest of the Astark mansion. There was a bit of a commotion going on in there, and the receptionist told the two ladies who had come to him asking for help that they should have taken care of their valuables themselves. However, one of them slammed the desk and shouted that there was a rogue present at the stable. She demanded for him to run an investigation at once, but he, on the other hand, reminded them that this was not a social venue in the royal capital where their belongings would be kept safe even if they left them somewhere. And to think that they parted with their valuables so casually like that, he commented that the two of them must be quite well bred. The other young lady who was with her seemed a bit shy, and she asked Marie to just calm down for now. She admitted that the shopkeeper was indeed right, and it was their failure to manage things properly. So all they could do right now was just take this as a costly lesson. Marie did not argue, but she just felt bad that because of her careless actions, her lady would have to go hungry for a while, but she, on the other hand, did not mind that. The young lady then called out to everyone, and she bowed down, sincerely apologizing to all of them for taking up their time and keeping them waiting in line. The men were not angry at them anymore, and they even felt bad for them, seeing what bad luck they had. Just as the two of them were about to head out, Marie checked her pockets, and she was shocked as she had lost something yet again. Turns out, the shared carriage ticket that they had bought, she had lost them as well. They both looked at the shopkeeper to get some assistance, but he did not even want to listen to them, and told them to just leave already. They had no clue what they should do now, since the heavy rain had destroyed the bridge as well, and to get to the northern town, the only way was to take a mountain carriage, but now that was not an option. The young lady considered just walking all the way when suddenly, Licht approached them, and Marie quickly got in front of her as she did not know what his intentions were. The divine sword turfing was also quite surprised to see how fast her reaction time was, considering she was just a maid. He asked them both if they were okay with letting the thief slip away just like that, and they replied that they could not just force a body search, as it was something only the city guard were authorized to do. But then, the young lady noticed that he was silently incanting a magic spell, and then suddenly, he activated a spell, which left both of them confused as it was their first time seeing such a spell. He explained to them that it was an original spell that he had created by combining transparency and metal detection, which left Marie even more baffled. She turned to her princess and asked her if there was really such a thing as transparency magic, and, if so, exactly how much they could see with it. However, she admitted that it was actually her first time hearing about such a spell as well, so she was not really sure how it worked. Meanwhile, Licht was just scanning all the people that were in there, until eventually, he found the one he had been looking for. The thief who had stolen from them was sitting right there, and he pointed towards the red-nosed man. The man argued that he was not a thief and that he was just talking rubbish, but Licht told him that there was no point in him making excuses anymore. He could clearly see that he had an unreasonable amount of gold coins in his pocket. However, the man continued to deny his accusations and stated that he was only making all this stuff up. In response, he simply smiled and said that even though he might look like a mere swordsman, he could use magic as well. And to prove that he was not lying, he also told him that the underwear he was wearing right now had hearts and roses all over it. He invited everyone to check that for themselves if he was lying or not, and they all started discussing that they really should check it out. However, the man was in no mood to entertain such baseless accusations and was about to leave when Licht tried to stop him. The man quickly got on the defensive and warned him that he would report him to the city guard if he even tried to use violence against him. However, little did he know that his pants were already down, and Licht advised him that he should not go to the city guard while he was in such a ridiculous state. To top it all off, the underwear that he was wearing was the same one as he had described, and everyone started laughing at him. They made fun of him for forgetting to tighten his belt, but Marie, on the other hand, knew what exactly had happened. Even though it was for a very short moment, she saw it herself, how Licht moved with incredible speed, and he cut the belt with a dagger. That alone was enough to convince her that he possessed serious sword skills, while he went ahead to check what was in that man's pockets. He found a pouch full of gold coins, and Marie confirmed that that's exactly what she was looking for. The thief continued to make excuses and said that he had inherited that money from his uncle who had just passed away. Since gold coins don't have names written on them, the thief dared them to prove that this pouch was theirs, and just then Marie shouted that there were 7 gold coins and 24 silver coins inside that pouch. Furthermore, 3 of those silver coins were half broken, and Licht decided to check if she was right or not. Turns out she was indeed right, and with that, it was proven that the man in front of them was in fact a thief. He fell down and started talking to himself that this was supposed to be an easy job. However, this group was different from what he had heard. While Marie and the young lady were celebrating in the back as they had finally managed to get their stuff back. The princess then noticed Licht leaving the shop, and she wanted to go after him. But Marie had some things that she needed to take care of in that shop, and she requested her to just stay there for a moment while she went ahead to get the preparations done. Outside, Licht sat beneath a tree, and the divine sword asked him if he was trying to look cool by leaving without even introducing himself to those ladies. But putting that aside, she was curious to know why he helped them out, as she had thought he was someone who was very indifferent to others. He admitted that he actually had no intention of helping them out at first. However, when he saw the young princess bowing down and apologizing to everyone for causing them trouble, that really caught his attention. Speaking of which, the 2 ladies approached him, and they thanked him for helping them out back there. The princess then asked Marie to give it to him, and even though she looked a bit reluctant, she gave him a pouch of coins as a reward for helping out the young lady get her belongings back. Turfing also wanted to know how much money that was, and he told her that there were 5 gold coins in that pouch, which even left her surprised as well. He said to them that they were giving him way too much money, as 5 gold coins meant that a commoner could cover his food expenses for a whole year. Marie agreed with him as well, but she could not really do anything about it since the princess was the one who insisted she reward him with 5 gold coins. While the young lady pointed out that there was absolutely no one at the stable who was ready to help them out except for him, so she believed that it was only natural to repay such kindness. Licht acted modest and stated that it was just a coincidence he was there at that time as well, but she, on the other hand, did not think that and told him that he was a very honorable person. Both she and Marie were moved by his actions, and because he was such an honorable traveler, she actually had one more thing she wanted to request from him. She asked him if he could be their company for a while and help them reach the northern town. Hearing that, he was a bit taken aback, and even Marie herself was surprised to hear that from her. She assured the young lady that they did not need anyone else to be their company, as she was more than enough to protect her. However, the princess pointed out how she had been struggling a lot recently, and she could tell that she was starting to get tired, because the usual Marie that she knew would not have let a thief steal from her. Nonetheless, Marie stated that they could still not trust those whose background was uncertain, even though he seemed more than capable. But then she looked at his innocent face, and she started second-guessing whatever she just said. Licht, on the other hand, simply chuckled, and he admitted that although he had thought she was just another well-bred noble daughter, she was actually quite a clever strategist. She first gave him a handsome reward, and if he were to accept such a large sum, he wouldn't be able to refuse whatever she wanted to ask from him next. The princess continued to play dumb and said that she had no idea what he was talking about. She was quite confident in her judgment of people, and she could tell that he was someone who wouldn't be swayed by something as simple as a high reward. Still, he admitted that having more travel money was never really a bad thing, and so he decided to accept her request. He introduced himself to them both and finally agreed to take on the role of their company. The young lady wanted to introduce herself as well, but she was feeling a bit hesitant. He noticed that, and he assured her that a false name would be fine as well, since this relationship of theirs was only going to last till they arrived in the northern town. Since that was the case, the princess finally removed her hood and introduced herself as Ria. The 2 of them shook hands, cementing their deal, while Marie, on the other hand, felt really weird seeing that, and she told him not to touch the young lady so casually like that. Meanwhile, a group of men were observing them from afar, and their leader was also a bit surprised to see that a traveler had joined the 2 ladies. Nonetheless, he wanted to finish his mission, and he commanded his men that if the boy got in the way of their plan, they were free to dispose of him. Later, the 3 of them got on to a shared carriage and they made their way towards the northern town. Licht was just enjoying the outside view from the carriage when suddenly Ria started giggling, and she commented that the way he was gazing out of the window, it looked like he was back to being a child. Marie teased him a little and asked him if he was really a child who had never ridden before, and without any hesitation, he admitted that this was indeed his first time riding a carriage, since his brothers always used to look down on it as a beast's ride. Plus, he was very much enjoying seeing unfamiliar sights while bumping along with them. Rhea was simply happy to hear that, while Marie told him that he was free to enjoy himself, but at the same time, he needed to make sure to earn his keep. She was only focused on protecting the young lady, and she advised him not to forget about that, which he completely understood as well. He briefed them both that he had already checked the safety of the 10 passengers that were inside that carriage with them, and none of them had brought any dangerous item with them. Additionally, each carriage had a guard on board as well, so he assured them that there was no need for them to worry so much. However, little did he know that outside, one guard had already been taken out, and now a mysterious footed man was driving the carriage. Back inside, there was an old lady who offered them some frozen food that she had with her and told them that it was quite delicious. Marie, being the logical one, did not accept that since the old lady was just a stranger, and they could not be sure what might be in that food. But Licht, on the other hand, gladly accepted it and started eating. She started shouting at him that he was being too reckless, and if he were to get sick after eating that, then he would only be a liability for them. However, to make her shut up for a moment, he simply stuffed that food in her mouth as well. He told her to just relax and assured her that if there was poison in anything, he would be able to spot it with ease since he had been very careful about poison for pretty much his whole life, while she just started wondering exactly what kind of a childhood he had. Putting that aside, he asked Rhea if she would like to have some as well, and she gladly accepted it as well. She could not believe how delicious it was, and she liked that a lot. The old lady observed him and Rhea, and she asked them if they both were a couple. Marie got really pissed, and she was about to say that they were not, but Licht interrupted her and stated that the two of them were indeed a couple. Rhea was just too surprised to even say a word, while Marie questioned him what the hell he was trying to do saying something so bizarre. But then she overheard two men discussing among themselves how they were aiming for her as well, but now that she already had a boyfriend, they did not stand a chance. Licht explained to both of them that if they roleplay like this, no man would even try to approach Rhea until they reached the northern town. He also briefed them that this was actually a trick that his sister often used to protect him, and they both began to agree that he was right. Just then, all of a sudden, the carriage stopped abruptly, and everyone started wondering what had happened. One man began banging on the window and asked the driver what was going on out there. The window opened, and then suddenly, the man's throat got sliced, leaving everyone stunned. They all panicked and started running outside, while Licht warned them not to rush outside like that. However, it was too late, and as everyone got out, there was a man just waiting for them outside. Licht heard their screams, and he quickly asked Marie to stay by Rhea's side and protect her. There was no telling how many bandits there were, which put them at quite a disadvantage, but nonetheless, he decided to check the situation outside. Just then, Rhea noticed the old lady that was with them, and after seeing the man who had just died in front of them, she was crying and trembling in fear. Rhea simply hugged her and she apologized to her because deep inside, she knew that all of this was happening because of her. Licht peeked outside, and everyone who had ran outside was dead on the ground. The man called out to Rhea, whose actual name was Aria Rose, and told her to just come with them quietly as they were not there to take her life, and all this needless killing was not necessary. He threatened her that if she resists, only more people will die, and so it was up to her to make that choice. Mary said to her that she must not go out there no matter what. However, Licht on the other hand simply asked her what she wanted to do. The young princess expressed that she did not want to let anyone else die because of her, but then he told her that even though she wanted that, it was pointless, and even if she goes out there, the outcome won't change. Just looking at that man outside, he was certain that they planned to kill them all right there. Their aim was to kidnap the princess, and after that, they were not going to leave any witness alive. Since he did not really have much of an option, Licht stepped outside by himself and stated that they were all quite bold to think that they would be able to kidnap the princess just like that. He questioned the leader of that group who their employer was, but of course he refused to answer him. Just then, another man tried to sneak up on him from behind and attack him. However, Licht simply stood there, and out of nowhere, some vines grabbed that man's arm and pinned him on the ground, not letting him move at all. He got back to questioning the leader and asked them how many of them were there, while he, on the other hand, was still shocked to see that he was able to use binding magic with such ease. Licht was also surprised to see that they actually had some knowledge of magic, and he guessed that they must not be just any regular bandits. Whatever the case, he charged up a fireball spell and ran straight towards the leader. He was not going to back down from close combat either, and the bandit brought out his two blades to launch a counterattack. But to his shock, the blade passed right through him, and he realized that it was just a mirage. The real Licht was right behind him, and before the leader could even turn around completely, he attacked him using the fireball spell. However, that did absolutely nothing to him, and the leader mocked him, saying that there was no way he could take him down with that level of firepower, which left Licht completely shocked. Marie, watching them from inside the carriage, could not understand why he was hesitating in such a situation and shouted that he had to fight with the intent to kill or else he would die. The leader also agreed with her statement, and he complimented Licht that he got some nice skills, but even then, there was a fundamental difference between him and the rest of his group, who suddenly appeared in front of him and surrounded him from all sides. He told him that the difference was, to achieve their goal, they all were willing to pay any price, and the man who was stuck with binding magic demonstrated just that. As to break free from the vines, he straight up cut off the hand that was pinning him down. Left with only one hand, the man ran straight towards the carriage to take out Arya. However, Marie was not going to allow that to happen, and before he could even reach her, she threw a knife at him and took him down. The leader realized that she was not just a mere maid but actually the princess's bodyguard, so he decided to take care of her himself and instructed his men to deal with Licht. But then, all of a sudden, Licht brought out his divine sword, and he took all of them out in a blink of an eye. Before the leader could even comprehend what had just happened, he swung his sword at him with such foes. It ripped off his cloths and pushed him back. He could not believe that he was able to take down 4 of his men with just a single swing of his sword. It was not humanly possible, and he just stood there, frozen in place, completely defenseless. Marie as well commented that this was not something normal humans could achieve, and she asked Arya if she had any idea what that sword was. She knew exactly what it was, and she realized that Licht was, in fact, one of the few divine sword users in the world. He had heard that the divine sword could even slice through rock and iron like cloth, and now, finally seeing it in action, he was actually a bit glad to see that it lives up to the legend. Turfing took that personally, and she questioned him if he really thought that her abilities would just rust because she was resting for a few centuries. A divine sword needed no maintenance, and there was absolutely nothing that could escape her blade, except that he had left one alive in front of him. She praised him that he was indeed quite skilled at igniting the divine sword, and so she wanted him to show everyone his real power. He quickly charged ahead to attack the leader, and he tried to block it with his blade, but it went flying back, and even though he only received a single slash, his finger bones were already shattered. He knew that if he got hit by another one of his attacks, that would be the end of him, so he tried to fight back. However, it was too late, and Licht slashed him with the divine sword. The leader was sliced completely in half, and he died right there. With blood everywhere, Licht stood tall, and Turfing asked him if he was all right. Miri came up to him and praised him that he did well. At first she had thought he was just a novice, but she was actually surprised to see that he could handle himself. However, judging from his expression, she asked him if this was his first time killing someone, and he confirmed that it was. But then he looked at Arya, and he simply smiled, assuring her that there was no suspicious presence nearby and they would be safe for a while. Therefore, she did not need to be afraid anymore, but she, on the other hand, felt really bad for him. She put her hand on his chest and could tell how much he longed for peace and quiet. However, his talent would not allow him to have that. Seeing that look on her face, he asked her what she was trying to say, but she remained silent. Putting that aside, there were still some survivors left, and he told everyone that they should get back on the carriage and leave from there while they still had the chance. However, everyone seemed terrified, and they started looking at each other. Together, they all expressed that they did not want to ride in the same carriage as the young princess. They requested the 3 of them to just go ahead, while they had decided to leave after their carriage was out of sight. That really pissed off Marie, and she questioned them if they had any idea who this young lady in front of them was, but they simply did not care whoever she was. They were only afraid for their lives and were not going to put it on the line for someone they did not even know. Arya also stopped her and agreed that they should do as they were saying. She requested Marie to take care of the carriage, and as for Licht, there was something that she wanted to discuss with him. And so the 3 of them got on a carriage and headed out. As they were on their way, he was still looking outside the window, and Arya asked him if he was still concerned about what was happening outside. He nodded and said that he was not really in the mood to enjoy the scenery right now. Putting that aside, he asked her why those men were trying to kidnap her instead of just killing the princess. It was not going to be the same as abducting the daughters of low-ranking nobles or merchants, in exchange for which they could get a high ransom. She was a princess, and even if they got the ransom, they would be hunted for life, and escaping would be nearly impossible. He believed that only a fool or someone with a lot of power would think to scheme like that, and if someone really had that kind of power, he would be on par with the king himself. Arya, instead of answering his questions, just smiled and changed the subject, stating that she wished they had met him sooner. Then that way, maybe she could have eased Marie's burden a little. On top of that, she felt that it was destiny that she was able to meet a divine swords wielder, and she asked him what he planned to do once he arrived in the northern city. Seeing how she was trying to avoid his questions, he asked her if she still expected him to guard her after reaching the city, and she said yes. She clarified that the reason why she could not tell him the things he wanted to know was because if she did, then she would be putting his life in danger as well, and he did not argue any further. He understood her point and agreed not to talk about it again, which made her very relieved. She also apologized to him for keeping him in the dark, but it was just something that could not be helped. Later on, the three of them finally arrived at their destination, the northern city. They all got off the carriage, and it was time for them to part ways. But before that, Arya asked him if he was also going to be staying in that town for a while, and he confirmed that he was, since he was planning to register with the Adventurers Guild as well. Since that was the case, Arya quickly wrote down a letter, and she asked him to take that letter with him. It was a letter of recommendation from the princess herself, and with that, she was certain he wouldn't be turned away. He accepted the letter and thanked her for that. She assured him there was no need to thank her, as it was the least she could do for him. The divine sword was also glad to see what a nice girl this young princess was, writing down a letter of recommendation without even having to say that. As he took his leave from them, Turfing questioned him why he declined the princess's invitation of staying by their side, and he answered that he did not want to be used by some powerful figure just because he had a nice set of skills. He had already decided that he wanted to live outside of such ties the moment he left the Estark name, and he was not planning to get stuck in that sort of thing once again. Besides, with her by his side, he did not think he needed anybody else, and she started teasing him, asking if this was a love confession or something. As he walked away from the ladies, Marie stood there, wondering if they should really just let him go like that. Arya jokingly asked her if she was starting to like him, and she replied that she did not particularly hate him. She just did not want someone of uncertain background to get too close to the young princess. Her only duty was to be both shield and sword for Arya, and even when she resents her for that, she was not going to back down from her duty and would continue to meddle. Arya did not mind that at all, and as a matter of fact, she was counting on her as well. With that said, now that there was no point in them lingering around there, she reminded her that they had come to this city for a reason. And so they both decided to move forward and fulfill their mission. Meanwhile, Licht arrived at an inn, and he just lay down on the bed to rest for a while. Turfing asked him if he was not going to the guild now, and he said that he would think about it tomorrow. He already had more than enough funds on hand, and he believed there was no need for him to rush these things, since he had already made plans for the future as well. Starting tomorrow, things were going to get quite busy, so for now, he just wanted to take some rest. With that said, he fell a rest right away, and Turfing was also surprised to see how quickly he had fallen a rest. She recalled that in the end, he was still just a 15-year-old boy, and to her, he was practically just a little baby. She let him rest and went to rest herself. But then, in the middle of the night, Turfing noticed that someone had entered their room through the window. She tried to wake Licht up, telling him that there was an intruder in the room, but he did not move at all. Turns out it was none other than Marie, and she sat down next to him. She already knew that he was awake, because he was someone who would have easily noticed the moment someone entered his room. However, seeing how he was not resisting how she was throwing herself onto him, she asked him if he was fine with accepting her purity, and at that moment, he finally opened his eyes. He pushed her away, questioning her what the hell she was trying to do, and what she hoped to achieve by pretending to be a bad person. He knew that there was something she wanted to gain by doing all this, and he asked her what it was. She finally confessed that because she could not afford his compensation, this was the only option she could come up with as a way to repay him. She acted tough, telling him that he was free to do whatever he wanted with her, and she was not going to stop him either. But then, all of a sudden, she started crying, and it became clear that she was only putting up a show. He asked her not to cry and wiped the tears off of her face. He could not stand seeing a woman cry in front of him, because his entire childhood, he always saw his mother crying alone. Whenever he saw that, it hurt his soul, and just thinking about that now, it made his head hurt. Marie asked him if he was okay, and if something was wrong, but then, all of a sudden, he hugged her very tightly. He was holding her a bit too tightly, and she asked him not to do that as it was starting to hurt her. But then she noticed that he was actually trembling. He kept repeating the same word, no, and even though Marie did not understand what was going on with him, she embraced him as well and assured him that everything would be okay, because she was right there by his side. After a while, when he finally calmed down, he was embarrassed with himself, and the divine sword also teased him, congratulating him as starting today, he had finally turned into a man. He corrected her that he still hadn't taken her purity yet, and Turfing asked him if he was even interested in her or not. She was starting to think that maybe he had no interest in women whatsoever, since he did not react to seeing them naked, and he answered that he was not completely uninterested in women. It's just that he got quite used to seeing his sister's body, as he used to sneak into bed and rest with her, to which Turfing commented that that's quite a controversial statement. Hearing all that, Marie asked him who he was talking to. He then turned to Marie, and seeing the cold look that he was giving her, she asked him if he was angry that she intruded in his room without his permission. But even if he was, she reminded him that he had already seen her half naked, so they were kinda even. He simply smiled at her and told her that she should save that beautiful skin of hers for her future husband. As for who he was talking to, he answered that he was having a conversation with his divine sword. It was passed down in the Estark family, and by the looks of it, only he could hear its voice. Marie was a bit confused hearing that he could actually communicate with the divine sword, but what really caught her attention was that he just mentioned the Estark name. He explained to her that until just a few days ago, he was one of the Estarks as well. However, right now, he was just like any other ordinary person, as he was exiled from the Estark family. She asked him if Theseus von Estark was his father, and he confirmed that he indeed was. Theseus Estark was quite the renowned hero since the founding of Ladocris, and was also the protector of the royal family. People called him the strongest swordsman and the undefeated general. After learning that Licht was actually his son, it all made sense to her why he was so strong, and she expressed that she was starting to want him by their side even more now. He then questioned her why she was being targeted along with the princess as well, since he had heard commoners were not involved in royal matters, and besides, a princess should have royal knights by her side to protect her, which made him wonder why they did not have any guards with them. Not only that, he had a lot more questions, like what was Arya doing all the way out here, and who was it that was after her life. He had already revealed his true identity to her, and he tried to convince her that they should at least share a little about themselves as well. Marie, on the other hand, simply asked him what he intended to do after knowing all that. He pointed at her and told her that just 15 centimeters from the tip of her left chest, she had multiple scars on her lower abdomen. She got really embarrassed and questioned him why he was staring at her even though he seemed uninterested in her just a few moments ago. As for the scars, she got them while she was protecting the young princess. She called him a perverted creep for staring at her without consent, while he said to her that he actually admired her loyalty to Arya a lot, and he even believed that the noble spirit of hers wouldn't lose to a knight. Therefore, he could tell that it was very much unlike her to use her body to ask for help. She told him to just shut up, as it was none of his concern, but he also understood that she must be in quite a bind to go as far as to rely on a powerless commoner like him. Since that was the case, he had decided that he wouldn't let them go home alone. He was neither a noble nor a knight, but still, he did not want to abandon a crying woman, because he believed that a man who would do something like that was even lower than a common beast. Marie smiled and admitted that she was actually wrong about him, and just like Arya had said, he was indeed a very kind person. As for answering his questions, she finally explained to him that even Arya herself did not know the full details, because it was she who had done all this on her own. She wanted his word that he would not tell Arya about today, otherwise she would also tell her how he lost his composure after seeing a woman naked in front of him, and he argued that it was not her skin that flustered him. But it did not matter, and she asked him to follow her, as it was about time to tell him everything that he wanted to know. As they both walked through the streets, he noticed how empty the streets were, which was quite strange considering how busy it was during the daytime. Marie briefed that they were currently in the Holy District, where many devout resided. People like them walked around during the day a lot, but she guessed that they probably didn't venture outside during nighttime. She also informed him that this city, Ice Hill, was the only place where the bishop of the Ladocris Holy Church had judicial authority, which was completely untouched by nobility. Hearing that, he began to understand why they chose this city, and even though they had noble blood, they still disliked aristocracy. Marie then got to the point and explained to him that the nobility who was targeting Arya's life was, in fact, the finance minister of the Ladocris kingdom, named Lord Balmung. She asked him if he knew about him, and he confirmed that that man was actually a friend of his father. Lord Balmung and Loras Stark were quite famous figures in this country, and the House of Balmung was known for their governance, while the House of Estark was known for their martial prowess. He wondered if the two of them were actually more close than he had thought, and Marie could not say that for sure either. Since that was the case, it meant that his father was one of the suspects as well, and he asked her if she was really willing to trust him even after knowing that he was the son of a suspect that was after them. She simply asked him back if he was in cahoots with the Balmonk. He answered that he was not, and that's all she needed to hear. Since Arya seemed to trust him a lot, that was more than enough for her as well. He was a bit confused, and he asked her why she trusted her so much, and she replied that the young princess actually had an incredible eye for people and instincts, which was a nice lifeline for a princess who was especially known for her incompetence and being useless. As soon as he heard that word, he asked her what she meant by that, and she finally revealed to him that even though Arya was the princess of the magical kingdom of Ladocress, she was incapable of using magic. The kingdom of Ladocress was founded by a group of mages, where a person's worth was often measured by their magical powers. For nobles, a high magical affinity was a status symbol, which often determined the choice of heirs. That's why Lict's mother made him pretend to be incompetent, so that Minerva could not get her hands on him. However, even in a magical realm, not everyone could gather the power of using magic, and occasionally, even noble families give children who were not able to use magic, and they branded them as useless. In such cases, those children were either exiled to avoid leaving negative legacies, or they were simply erased from history, as if they never existed. This had been a recurring theme among the nobilities, and this was the real ugly darkness of this whole kingdom. Coming back to the present, Lit was quite surprised to hear that Arya was one of them, since he had never heard of a princess who was deemed useless, and he asked Marie if that was really true. She was saddened to confirm that it was indeed the truth, and she guessed someone as talented as him would not even begin to understand how these so-called useless kids were treated in this kingdom. But little did she know that he knew about it all too well. However, because he was only acting like he was incompetent, he could endure all the scorn that he received from the others, because in his heart he knew that it was all just a lie. However, Arya was someone who could actually not use magic, and just thinking about all sorts of things that she would have had to hear, he could not believe how she was able to smile so beautifully even after being in such circumstances. But then Marie added that the princess was not really completely useless. She possessed the royal magic, which was worthy of her lineage. However, it was something that could not be measured by any magic measuring device. He had no clue what she meant by a magic that cannot be measured by any gauge, but just then, something clicked to him, and he pointed out something like that was only heard in fairy tales. She reminded him how magic had attributes like fire, water, earth, light, and darkness, and the normal gauge mainly detects attributes to measure a person's magical power. However, since her magic belonged to none, Arya was different. He asked her if she was trying to say that she possessed a magic that was attributeless. She confirmed that that was precisely it, and because she was attributeless, it distanced her from the world's magic system, making normal magic useless for her, and effectively making her useless as well, all because she lacked other magical elements. Lit still could not believe that something like that existed in real life as well, but then the divine sword called him out and stated that he had already encountered someone without attributes before this as well. He realized that she was actually talking about herself, and she briefed him that what makes the divine swords so special was the fact that, unlike other regular magic swords that activate spells based on the 6 attributes, the divine sword invokes the 7th attributeless magic. Furthermore, she told him that for humans, attributeless magic was something that only existed in the realm of gods, and since they were not able to understand what kind of magic it truly was, it simply showed that humanity still had not reached that level of advancement. A few moments later, the two of them reached their destination and they arrived outside a church. Marie took him inside, and looking around, he began to understand that the church grounds were more like a battlefield hospital. He then came across an old man, and to his shock, the old man was actually dead. Marie informed him that these people were not mere refugees, and she told him to just look at their skin color. He noticed that the color of their skin was gray, and there were dragon-like scales on them as well. He finally realized that they were all suffering from stone scales disease, and Marie was impressed seeing that he already knew about this stuff. He shared with her how he used to hide and read about these things in the library, and since that was the case, she assumed he must also be aware of the horrors of the stone scales disease. Their skin starts turning all scaly, and eventually it becomes hard like stone. Once it makes its way to the organs, it was a guaranteed death for that person. He asked her why she had brought him there in the middle of the night, but then he saw Arya was also there, and she was helping out the sick people by giving them food. Marie informed him that the young princess was secretly providing food aid to all these people. Confused, he asked her if the two of them had come all the way from the royal capital for such a dangerous task, and she responded that he was only half right. The reason why she was helping them out was simply because she was too kind, and as for their main reason why they had come there, the princess had stolen a remedy from the royal pharmacy for their sake. He was really surprised to see how bold she was, and Marie also added that that's exactly why she loved her so much. But more importantly, he asked her why they had to steal the medicine, as he believed that even though it might have taken a bit more time, the king would have provided it to these people either way to prevent a catastrophe happening in this kingdom. However, she brought up that if someone had not diverted the remedies, they would have already arrived there, and they would not have to steal it. On top of that, there was still the fact that the princess was attacked by thieves while she was carrying it. Hearing all that, he wondered if it could be the work of Lord Balmung as well, but Marie did not have any solid proof, and she could not just conclude that from merely gathering rumors in the capital. Yet it was very much possible. With that said, that was everything that she had to tell them, and she left him to make a decision for himself while she went ahead to meet up with Arya. He once again looked at how brightly Arya was smiling, and he contemplated that Balmung was indeed a greedy minister who was renowned for his pursuit of magic. Because of that, he could somewhat understand why he desires Arya, since she was an attributeless subject. However, he was also certain that Balmung won't be able to escape unscathed for such actions against royalty. Keeping that in mind, he wondered if he actually had a way to evade this grave sin. But then he finally figured out what was really happening, and it all came back down to Arya being branded as useless. There were countless ways to expel the useless ones in this kingdom, and he speculated that they must be trying to strip her of her claim to the throne. While he was lost in his thoughts, an old man approached him from behind and asked him if he was a knight of the young princess. He was very grateful to have them there, and before Licht could even clarify, the old man shared with him that even though they had been waiting endlessly, the medicines never arrived, and this city began falling into despair. Ice Hill was the only city in this kingdom that was free from noble influence, and because they were always entangled in the schemes of nobles who wanted to take control of this city, he was certain the Medicine Deli was because of that as well. Even though many beautiful sights were visible from there, the city had ceased to function due to the outbreak of the stone scale disease. If the young princess had not brought the medicine for them, the whole city would have perished, and therefore everyone in that city saw Arya as their benefactor. She was truly just like a saint, and even in the worst situations, just being by her side naturally spread smiles on everyone's faces. The old man could not help but see her as the reincarnation of Saint Rukia herself, and hearing all that, Licht just stood there in silence. He still could not understand why she could smile so purely like that, and how could she be so kind to others, even though this world was a very hard place for her to live in. But then, thinking about all that, he remembered that his mother was also just like her, and she was always smiling as well, unless she was alone, and then her true emotions came out. He refused to believe that they could exist, a person who would keep smiling even after facing so many hardships from this world, and he had learned through his mother's death that humans just could not be that strong. However, one look at Arya, and he could tell that she had gone up against everything that he had believed his entire life, and he wondered if he stayed with her, would he ever be able to smile like that? Would he ever want to live for someone else's sake once again? And most of all, if he saw this world through her eyes, would it look different to him as well? The old man went up to her and told her that dawn was approaching. He requested her to just take some rest now, because if she were to collapse there, God would surely scold him. Marie also insisted that she should definitely rest for a while now and let the rest of them take care of everything. She was clearly exhausted, and she knew that as well, so she listened to them, and along with Marie she took their leave. But then, just as she was going back, Licht came up to her, and holding his sword in his hand, he kneeled down in front of her like a knight. He first criticized both of them for their foolish actions and asked them what they planned to do if they got caught by the disease. Since Marie clearly could not stop her foolish actions, he wanted to be the one who could stop her and protect the young princess by being by her side. She made it very clear that she would never abandon the suffering people, and he already knew that she would say something like that. Therefore, he wanted to be the one who could protect someone like her. Now that he had cast aside the name Stark, he was nothing but a commoner, but still, he pledged his life and his divine sword to the young princess, Arya Rose. She was quite intrigued after hearing him say that he was previously an Estark, but she did not ask him any questions. She held his sword and agreed to take him in as her knight. Now that he was officially a knight, she wanted to grant him a new name, and that was Ice Hill. He was really surprised hearing that, and he recalled that the name of this city had quite a poetic resonance. Besides, he also felt that he was born to inherit this name, since Ice Hill suited him better than a Stark. Marie was also very happy to see that, and she was determined to work with him and protect the princess together. When all of a sudden, Arya passed out, and she fell right in his arms. At first she got a bit scared and wondered if she had gotten infected or something, but when they looked closely, they both realized that she had simply fallen arrest. Even the divine sword was surprised to see that she just fell arrest during the night awarding ceremony and understood that she must have been very exhausted. Lit also commented that truly there was no one like her, even among the nobles. She started talking in her rest, and she thanked him, Licht, for everything. With that, he was officially the princess's knight. Later on, after they were done with delivering the medicines to the Ice Hill City, the three of them headed towards the royal capital, Lactaris, in a carriage, and Arya was still fast arrest. Lit commented on how quietly she was resting, which was completely opposite to his sister, who snores, grinds her teeth, and won't fall to rest until she hugs him like a pillow. But then he looked at Marie, who also seemed really exhausted, and he asked her if she was feeling tired as well. He assured her that she could trust him with the night's watch so that she could also get some rest, and since that was quite an intriguing offer for her, she did not argue and took his word for that. With that said, both the ladies fell a rest, and he sat there, contemplating that even though he could not Von in his name since he still hadn't had a formal ceremony, gaining a new surname from a princess definitely felt like a significant step to him. But at the same time, he also knew that if word got out that a member of the Estark family was now guarding the princess, it could lead to a big misunderstanding, and the news would reach all the way to Minerva's ears as well. If that happened, then that meant he would have to deal with thieves that were targeting Arya as well as assassins sent by Minerva, and he wanted to avoid that at all cost. He had made a vow that he would protect the princess with his life, and he was determined to keep it. He then looked at Marie, who was resting peacefully, and he thought to himself how he had never imagined that someone other than his sister would actually trust him this much. He had never thought about it until leaving Estark, but here he was now. Later, Mary finally woke up and she saw Arya, also awake, just silently laughing at her. She asked her if something was wrong, and Licht stated that even though he had not met up with many women, he was quite relieved to find out that it was not just his sister who rests like a wreck, and she was in fact very much like her. Arya could not stop laughing, and Marie felt really embarrassed. She shouted at him, telling him that he was not in any position to say all that since he was the one who fainted right after seeing her naked, which left Arya completely surprised. While he shouted back at her, reminding her that that was supposed to be a secret, the princess just laughed seeing the two of them fight like that, and told them to just cut it out already, since they had already reached their destination. At last, the three of them had reached the royal capital, Lactaris. Arriving at the gate, there was a long line of people who wanted to enter the capital as well, and a guard stopped their carriage, telling them that they can't just skip the line like that. But then, the driver showed him a letter, and the guard was shocked to see that the letter had a royal crest on it. Arya greeted the guard through the window, and with a smile on her face, she thanked the guard for his hard work and hoped he would keep doing his best at work. He allowed them to pass through, but he was just completely frozen in place after seeing how beautiful the princess was, while the people standing in line started yelling at him to just hurry up with the inspection. As soon as they entered the capital, Licht was quite surprised seeing how lively it was, and Arya asked him if it was his first time in the royal capital, to which he answered that he actually did come there once with his father. But of course, it was a long time ago, so he did not remember much about it now, and looking around, it was quite clear that 10 years could change a lot. But then the princess stated that 10 years won't change anything. According to her experience, she had now realized that this country does not like drastic changes at all, and Licht remained silent for a moment. She then asked him if she could get some of his time, since there was this shop that she wanted to pay a visit to along with him, because if they were going to be in the capital, he needed to pay a bit more attention to the way he dresses. The two of them went to a clothing shop, and the shop owner was really happy to see that Princess Arya had come to his shop after such a long time. He started asking her how she had been and if she was keeping up with her studies, and she shared with him that she had been catching up on the theory quite nicely. But then the owner noticed the man she had brought with her, and he was quite surprised to see how handsome he was. Arya explained to him that the reason why she had come to his shop was so that he could tailor some cloths for him, while Licht, on the other hand, still kept trying to tell her that he did not want such considerations. But the owner also agreed that if he was going to be her knight, he should wear something better. He started inspecting the outfit that he was currently wearing, and he could tell that it was from the northern country. For Arya's sake, he wanted him to pay a bit more attention to his clothing, otherwise that would make him embarrassed as well. But then he noticed the sword that he was carrying with him, and Licht immediately started staring at him, signaling him not to even think about anything shady. The owner saw that, and with just that one look, he understood that he was quite the competent protector. Arya also added to that statement that, with him by her side, she was confident that she would be safe from her enemies, and to do that, she told him that she actually wanted him to accompany her to the Royal Academy so that he could protect her closely. As soon as he heard that, his mind was blown away, and he told her that he did not agree to go to the academy. She assured him that he did not need to worry, as she would obviously be paying him a generous reward, and as for his uniform, she asked the owner if he could get it done by the day after tomorrow. The owner asked her why she was in such a rush, and she explained to him that she needed to return to the academy by the start of the week. He assured her it would be done, and with that, her work there was complete. However, Licht stopped her right there, and grabbing her by the shoulder, he told her not to just keep pushing this conversation forward without even getting his consent first, as he had never agreed to attend the academy in the first place. But then, Arya got a little scared, and she started crying, asking him if he was lying when he said that he was going to protect her with everything he had. He stepped back and said to her that that's not what he meant by that. For sure, he would protect her, but he did not want to go to school, while the owner simply commented that making a lady cry was just the lowest action. His mind stopped working, and he could not understand what he should do now, since he was never really good with people who start crying. And since he did not really have much of an option now, he agreed to go to the Royal Academy with her. That made her extremely happy, and he started to wonder if her tears were real or she was just doing it to convince him. But whatever the case, he had now learned that she was very good at winning hearts. She had survived this long thanks to her charm and the allies that she had made, which was completely opposite to him, who had only made enemies wherever he went. Since they did not have much time, the owner began taking his measurements, and while he was doing so, Licht asked him to make it a little bit larger since he was still growing. But the owner reminded him that the princess herself was his sponsor, so he did not need to worry about that. He then asked Arya if the academy was even accepting new admissions at this time, because even though he had never attended school, he was pretty sure the admission period was long over. She simply replied that he did not need to think about it because she had got a plan for that. As they were speaking, she had actually sent Marie with her letter straight to the headmaster. She was certain that Marie would be able to take care of his admission. He asked her if Marie could really negotiate like that with the headmaster itself, and she answered that Marie was actually quite talented, and she was sure she would convince the headmaster. Later on, they left the clothing shop, and they finally returned back to Arya's home, where Marie was just waiting for them at the front door. She reported that everything went quite smoothly at the academy. As a matter of fact, she did not even have to negotiate with them, since they accepted their proposal without any hesitation, which actually surprised her a bit. Putting that aside, Arya informed him that Marie would be taking him to the guest room, and she asked him to just relax there for a while until dinner. As she took him to his room, Marie went ahead and just sit on his bed first. She told him that if there was anything he needed, he could just let her know, and she would prepare it. Licht shared with her that this room was actually more spacious and comfortable than his room in Estark, and she was glad to hear that. She also pointed out that now that he was the princess protector, he was pretty much on the same level as her, so she made it very clear that she was not going to give him any special treatment anymore, as if he was a guest or something. In fact, in terms of seniority, she was actually above him, and said that he should actually be showing respect to her. But jokes aside, she could tell that he must be thinking why this was such a small estate, and he agreed that this place was indeed not that big, considering Arya was a princess. On top of that, there were no guards at the gate, and the neighboring estates were much bigger, which made him wonder if this had something to do with Arya's incompetence. Marie explained to him that if a male child had been born to the current king, the young princess might have remained in the head palace. However, the next king of Lactaris was going to be chosen from among the 3 princesses, and Arya was second in line for the throne. But of course, there had never been a king who could not use magic, so even though she was second in line of succession, she was given this small estate to show everyone that she wouldn't be ascending to the throne, which basically meant that they had banished her from the royal palace. Licht asked her if Arya had any intention of taking the throne, and she simply replied that he should ask that question directly from the princess herself. With that said, she advised him to take some rest until it was time for dinner and left the room. As he was left alone in the room, he brought out the divine sword and pointed out that she had been unusually quiet today. Turfing just mocked him and said that he should really get good at understanding a woman's heart better, since even she had times when she wanted some peace and quiet. Putting that aside, she suggested to him that now that he had the time, he should write that letter to his sister that he promised to write once they settle into their new home. After all, she was taking care of him for 3 straight days and nights while he was out cold, and she was sure she would eagerly be waiting for his letter. He agreed that she had got a point there, and even though he had never written a letter before, he decided to give it a try and give his sister an update. He started writing down a letter detailing all his experiences ever since he left Estark. He left out the stuff with the bandits to avoid worrying her, but he did write about Marie and Arya in detail. He also mentioned that he would now be attending the Royal Academy. He knew that Aelin was both discreet and intelligent, and she knew how to keep secrets, but still, to prevent anyone from snooping and getting their hands on this letter before it reached her, he sealed it with magic and sent it with a carrier pigeon. Just like that, 2 days passed, and Lick tried out the new cloths that were specially tailored for him. Marie complimented him that it really suited him and told him that he should go and greet Arya as well to show off his new cloths. He expressed that he was quite surprised to see how quick she had been with the preparations, as he had thought it would take women a long time to get ready, and in response, Marie simply bragged that that's because she was an exceptionally skilled maid. He then went downstairs to meet up with Arya, and seeing him in his new uniform, she told him that he looked very wonderful in that. He just stood there at a loss for words when Marie started poking him, telling him that he should compliment the princess as well. He had absolutely no experience with that, but still he tried and said to her that her beautiful hair color paired wonderfully with the white uniform. Arya was really happy to hear that from him, and she noticed that his tie was a bit messy, so she fixed it for him. With that, the two of them were ready to head to the Royal Academy. Meanwhile, in the northern country of Estark, Aelin was lying down on Licht's bed, and she was missing her brother a lot. Just then, the carrier pigeon arrived at the window and gave her the letter. As she read the whole letter, she got to know that he was actually going to join the Royal Academy now, and that news left her very shocked. Later, as the three of them got on a carriage and were on their way to the Royal Academy, Arya handed him some papers, and confused, he asked her if there was going to be an exam. He had thought today would just be all about classes, but she just laughed and reminded him that today was Sunday, which meant that there were no classes. He got really embarrassed, and at that point, he realized that he had completely forgotten about the concept of days. Since he had never really lived by the days of the week while he was with the Estarks, he had lost track of them. On top of that, even after becoming a traveler, he hadn't really looked at a calendar, but now that he was going to be a student, he understood that he must pay attention to that. Arya then informed him that this exam was merely a formality, since his admission in the Royal Academy was pretty much a done deal already, and so she assured him he did not need to take it that seriously. The academy was a 30-minute carriage ride from the lake in the royal capital, and he recalled Arya had told him that there were about 1,000 students in total. Adding the staff and the caretakers that were there as well, over 2,000 people were living there. That much population was almost the size of a small town, and the students enrolled there were all outstanding students from across the nation, nobles and commoners alike. As he finally arrived at the academy, he was amazed to see how big it was and was quite impressed. The Divine Sword asked him if it was his first time attending school, and he confirmed that it was, since back when he was with the Estarks, many people disliked him being in public. He always struggled to interact or play with peers his age, so he usually spent his time in the massive library that the Estark castle had. The only one who was always there by his side was his sister Ellen, even though she did not like being in the library. Since that was the case, Turfing advised him to just enjoy this school life now that he had finally gotten the chance, but he, on the other hand, was not too sure about that because even now, he was merely playing the role of a student, when in reality, he was the princess's bodyguard. He did not come there just to have fun. However, at the same time, he agreed that experiencing something new did sound very exciting, and that put a smile on his face. Just then, Arya came up to him and expressed that she was very happy to see him smiling. He turned a little shy hearing that, and she then asked him if he was liking the Royal Academy. He replied that he had thought schools would be more modest and prioritize efficiency, but this Royal Academy, on the other hand, was unnecessarily vast and lavish, to the extent that it was feeling more like a palace than a school. She fully agreed with what he was trying to say, and she explained to him that this academy was a special school that was funded by the royal family itself. The academy's emblem was also the same winged lion as the royal family's crest. The only difference was that while the royal emblem had its wings spread wide, the academy's emblem had folded wings, which reflected the strong influence of the royal family. Furthermore, there existed a strict hierarchy in the academy as well, and those rankings were based on magic. Students were ranked by their magical ability into top tier, regular, and low tier, and it was always visible what rank a student belonged to because of their uniform. Even though the Royal Academy accepted students regardless of their status, it was not entirely equal either. In normal circumstances, Licht's abilities would have qualified him as a special student. However, because he had to make concessions to make admissions, his rank was different, and he was granted 3 badges. As for Arya, she was an honorary special student. After learning all that, he contemplated that since she could only use non-elemental magic, normally she would have been classified as a lower-tier student, but now, considering that she was an honorary student, he understood she must have been given special consideration due to her lineage. It became quite clear that this academy heavily reflects the royal family's wishes, and with all that out of the way, Arya offered to take him to the exam venue. As they arrived at the classroom, there were 3 teachers waiting for them, and one of them suddenly started acting like there was an awful stench coming into that room. He blamed Licht for that, and called him a bad commoner. He told him that this was not a place for lowly trash such as him, and questioned him what kind of tricks he used to gain the benefit of the princess's introduction. He stared at his face, his body, and admitted that he looked quite decent for a commoner, and asked him if he had already learned how to please a woman even at such a young age. Arya stepped up for him and stopped him right there, telling him to take back those words and apologize to him. But Licht, on the other hand, remained silent and said to her that there was no need for her to get mad. He was already used to people like those, since he grew up pretty much surrounded by them, and he advised her not to rise to their provocation either. He simply smiled and assured her that all this did not bother him at all, and so there was nothing for her to worry about either. Still, she was very pissed, but at the same time, she also understood that he was right, and causing a scene there might not be wise. However, she did not want to allow such remarks to go unpunished, and she hoped for him to feel the same way as her. The teacher then accompanied her outside to wait while the exam was underway, and as she walked back, Licht stood there, wondering why she was so angry on behalf of him. He had never been cherished his entire life, neither had he cherished anybody else. To him, everyone else was simply insignificant. However, Arya was different. She was someone who was worth saving, even if it meant he had to sacrifice himself. At that moment, it became clear to him that the two of them were just way too different. As she was leaving, he stopped her and shared with her that ever since he lost his mother, he had stopped caring about everything. That's why he never paid attention to what those insignificant people had to say about him. But if she wanted that, he was ready to strive to become that way as well, to be a better version of himself. Although he lacked the capacity to love everyone equally like she does, he was her knight, and so he once again vowed to her that he would always protect her, with everything he had got, and he was not only talking about protecting her from thieves and bandits, he was going to protect her from discrimination and unjust actions as well. That put a big smile on her face, and she was really happy to hear that. The teacher then instructed him to settle down quickly as they were going to start the exam, while he thought to himself about how he had always been nothing when he was in Estark. But now, Arya had granted him a new name and a place to belong to. He was now Licht Icehulk, a knight of the second princess of this country, and he wanted everyone to put respect on that name that she had given him. The teacher informed him that the exam would last for 1 hour and 30 minutes, and he should raise his hand once he was done. But then suddenly, the teacher noticed that he was staring him dead in the eye with intimidating eyes, and that terrified him a little. He was determined to show a discriminatory idiot like him the real power of Arya Rose's knight, and with that in mind, he started writing the test. But then, just a few minutes later, he raised his hand and told the teacher he was done with the test. They could not believe that he was already done with it, since it had only been 10 minutes since he started, when that racist old man approached him, and he was certain that he must have answered carelessly, since this test was just a formality. To prove that a commoner like him was just incompetent, he decided to score his paper right there, and he was sure he would be starting his academy life with the label of the lowest score in history. While he was checking his paper, the other teacher had a glance at it as well, and he recognized that the questions on it were from this year's university entrance exam. It was no wonder that the old man was losing his mind, since he had also insisted on preparing the exam questions himself. But then he noticed that he was acting really strange as he was checking that paper. The old man was shocked to see that Licht had scored 75 points, even exceeding the passing line of 70 points, and he did all that in just 10 minutes. He simply could not believe that, while Arya commented that that must mean his academic level was already at university level. Since the exam was over, Licht decided to take his leave, and he stated that because he was the princess's knight, he could not let her stay with a bunch of people like them any longer, since there was an idiot teacher who did not even respect the royal family. That statement really pissed off the old man, and he started yelling at him that even though he had managed to excel in the written exam, this was a magic school, and it won't be easy for someone without magical talent to survive in there. Just as he said that, his answer sheet started glowing, and that left all 3 teachers confused. The old man took a closer look at it, and he was shocked to see that all the right answers were glowing. But not only that, they formed a word from the ancient script, and then, all of a sudden, the paper caught fire and burned up. That caught him completely off guard, and he recognized the ancient script, which was a word that in modern language meant fool. He turned around, and Licht and Arya had already left the room. The teacher still could not believe that a mere commoner was able to figure out the patterns of ancient script just by looking at the answer sheets, and on top of that, he solved the university entrance exam question in such a short time. The old man had never seen anyone capable of doing that before, and he realized that Licht was not just an ordinary commoner, he was a cursed child with monstrous brain power. As he and Arya walked back, she wrapped her arm around his and thanked him. That gesture made him a bit awkward, and he asked her not to get too close to him, otherwise people would get the wrong idea. A couple of people were already starting to stare at them. However, she, on the other hand, simply did not care because she knew there would be a lot of rumors anyways, considering he got admission through her connection. But it did not matter, as she was sure everyone would soon understand how amazing he truly was. Seeing her talk like that, he pointed out that she speaks just like his sister, and she could tell the two of them must have gotten along well. With that said, now that the entrance exam was over, he asked her if she was heading back to the mansion, and she informed him that she won't be returning to the mansion for a while now, because, since her admission was officially granted, she was going to be living in the Royal Academy's dorms starting today. He did not know about that, so she explained to him that the Royal Academy was entirely dormitory-based, where students lived in one of the 36 dorms on campus. As for the dorm where he was going to be staying, it was for male students who were general and lower tier. He asked her if that meant he was going to be in a different dorm than hers, and she nodded, saying that she was going to be in the special student girls' dormitory. He did not like that, since it would prevent him from guarding her, but she assured him he did not need to worry, as special students were allowed to have attendance, which actually relieved him a little, as it meant he would be able to be by her side. The Divine Sword also agreed that she would much rather have that as well, since she did not want to be in a bad place such as the boys' dorms. The two of them then finally arrived outside the Crescent dorm, and there they saw a young girl sitting under the tree, and she asked him if he was the same Licht who was going to be enrolling today. He was really surprised to see her because she was not just any other ordinary girl, she was a dwarf. She introduced herself as Setsu, the cafeteria lady of this dorm, and she had heard from the head of department that an out-of-season transfer student was coming. She then asked him if that special student by his side was his girlfriend, and with a straight face he told her that he was just her bodyguard. The lady teased him and said that if he was planning to sneak a girl in for some fun, they should try to keep it quiet since the walls there were very thin and their noises could leak into the next room, while he just stood there, thinking this is precisely why one should never listen to a dwarf. Arya, on the other hand, started blushing really hard, and he noticed that as well, so he assured her he was not going to do anything weird, and she also nervously replied that she was not worried at all. Setsu already knew that they must be wanting to meet the dorm head, so she offered to go and get her for them since she was usually taking a stroll by the lake around this time. In the meanwhile, she asked them to wait in the dorm head's office. The two of them entered the dorm while Setsu went to call the dorm head, and Arya noticed that he was constantly looking at her, so she asked him if he was interested in Setsu, to which he replied that he kinda was, since he had not seen many dwarves working typical jobs like her. She could understand his curiosity since he was from Estark, and she explained to him that because the north was such a conservative area, it might seem unusual to him. However, in the royal capital, dwarves and elves were quite common. Those with abilities could easily find jobs there, and that was also why so many came from all over the country to work. Setsu was just an example of that. He then brought up what Setsu had said earlier about them and stated that he and Arya were not lovers. She agreed with him and added that the bond which was between them was more than just lovers. To her, they both were in a close relationship where they both protect each other's lives, and that left him speechless. Once again, he realized how kind of a princess she was, since he had never even heard of a nobility who would go as far to protect a knight. Suddenly, she came in real close to him, which caught him a bit off guard, and he asked her if something was wrong. She told him that starting today, she wanted him to call her just by her first name. No honorifics, no nothing, just her real name, because everyone who was close to her calls her that. He really did not know how to respond to that, but since she wanted that, he agreed to call her by her first name. But then he pointed out that she also uses honorifics while calling his name, which was a bit unfair, and she planned to keep it that way. He contemplated that it must be a trait from her natural kindness and upbringing. But at the same time, it was a bit awkward that a servant was using a casual name while the master called them with respect. Still, there was nothing much he could do about it, so he decided to just roll with it. They then arrived at the dorm head's office and entered inside, but to their surprise, The dorm head was already in there. She pointed out that in this Royal Academy, the two of them were the first ones who entered straight inside the dorm head's office without even knocking on the door. Arya quickly apologized to her and explained to her that they thought nobody was in there since they were told to wait in the office. However, she did not care about that and taught them that even if they think no one's around, they should always knock on the door before entering a room. So she wanted them to start over and kick them both out of her office. Arya knocked on the door, and the dorm head allowed them to come inside. As soon as they entered, Arya bowed to her and Licht followed her lead, bowing down as well, while the dorm head pointed out that she had knocked 3 times and asked her if that was intentional. Arya confirmed that it indeed was, as it was something she had learned at the royal palace. It was said that when they already know that someone is inside a room, they should knock 3 times on the door. The dorm head was pleased to hear that and could see that she really was a princess. However, Licht, on the other hand to her, seemed to lack etiquette since he was only following Arya's lead. He apologized to her and explained that since he grew up in the north, since childhood, his playmates were wild wolves, and wolves did not particularly knock. The dorm head understood where he was coming from and told him that there was no need for him to do the second knock, and he bluntly replied with, "I know." Once again, that pissed her off a little bit, and he quickly apologized, correcting himself, but at the same time, she was also starting to like him. She finally introduced herself as Jessica von Ockmunich, the dorm head of the Crescent Moon dorms, and she was also a lecturer on etiquette. She welcomed Licht to the Royal Academy and mentioned that she had also heard that he had done something quite interesting in the entrance exam, clearing the university test questions in 10 minutes. He tried to brush it off, saying that those were just rumors. Whatever the case, she advised him that he should not solely focus on his relationship with the princess and should carve his own path. She always enjoyed seeing promising young people and actually had high expectations from him. He bowed down and thanked her, which pleased her very much as it was a good response. With that said, she offered to give them a tour of the dorm. As they walked through the hallways, everyone started coming out of their rooms, and they were simply surprised to see that a girl was joining them. On top of that, it was not just any girl, it was the princess herself, and they all started wondering who that man was next to her. Meanwhile, Jessica informed him that even though this dorm usually had 2-person rooms, since he had just transferred midterm, he would have to spend some time alone. The first floor was for regular students, while the second and third floors were for lower-tier students. Additionally, meals, baths, and toilets were all shared, so she advised him to get used to group living. Turfing, like always, started teasing him and commented that doing group activities would be pretty much impossible for him, and she looked forward to seeing that. Jessica then showed him his room, and in that room, there were 2 beds, 2 study desks, and even a closet, which he believed was more than sufficient. The dorm head was surprised to hear that since many students usually complained about the modesty of their rooms, but he was different. He asked Arya if this is how lower-tier student rooms were, but she did not really know that since she had never seen it before, while Jessica added that it was very different from the special student room which she was used to. He noticed that his belongings were already in there, and she informed him that a messenger from the princess had delivered it just a few hours ago. She asked him to check if it was everything, and he confirmed that it was. Just then, Turfing called him out and told him that she could smell someone just like her. There was another divine sword just nearby. He began to understand why this Royal Academy was so renowned, and he agreed that it would not be too surprising if someone like him existed in this school. Turfing started wondering what would happen if there was a divine sword user who was stronger than him, but Licht, on the other hand, remained silent and was simply smiling. Arya noticed that he was once again talking to his sword, and at first, Jessica did not understand what she meant by that, but then she took a closer look at his sword and realized what was happening. Just then, she saw Arya stepping inside his room, and she stopped her right there. She told her that a lady before marriage should not enter a boy's room like that and instructed her to go back to her room. With that said, it was time for lunch, and she informed them that the cafeteria was in the building beyond the west exit. So the two of them made their way to the cafeteria and met up with Setsu again, who was just preparing meals for everybody. She was happy to see Licht could join them, and she called him out as a transfer student, which made everyone present there start gossiping about why there was a transfer student at this time of the year. Seeing how everyone was talking about him, it made him really annoyed, and he requested Setsu to keep her voice down since he was not particularly great at standing out among the crowd, and she apologized to him for making him uncomfortable. To make up for that, she even decided to give him an extra bread as an apology and told him that if he ever needed help with anything at all, he could always come to her and she would try to help him the best she could. Licht appreciated that a lot. He picked up his plate, and as he walked back, He thought to himself that even though he had only met her once, he had this feeling that this dwarf seemed familiar, but whatever it was, he did not feel bad about it. He looked back on how, until he met Arya, no one really even tried to get close to him. The people from Estark and all those who were around him always kept their distance from him. But now things were starting to look different. However, just as he was thinking that, a group of men came up to him, and they kicked the chair he was about to sit on. They were just like any other typical bullies, and they wanted to teach him some rules since he was still new there. One of them was that lower-tier students like him were inferior, and they must eat standing, while Licht, on the other hand, was not surprised at all, as these were exactly the kind of people he had dealt with his whole life. He refused to listen to them and stated that he could not eat like that because he was raised with dignity. That pissed them off really bad, and they questioned him if he was actually defying them. Just then, Setsu came running and asked them why they were causing such a commotion. The leader of those bullies told his men to take care of her, and they grabbed her and took her away. The bully then introduced himself as Vold, and he was the heir of Baron Vold Garland. He already knew that his name was Licht Icehulk, and Licht questioned him about how he did know about him. Vold had heard the rumors that said he charmed the princess to enroll in this academy, and he believed that an unrefined scum like him did not even deserve to hold a sword. Licht asked him if he was certain he wanted to declare a duel against him, and that's exactly what Vold wanted. He had also heard that he had not given any practical exam to take admission in this academy, so he gave him the opportunity to choose the method of this competition. Since that was the case, Licht decided to do the water ball magic, and that left Vold a bit confused. He knew exactly why he seemed so shocked, because water ball magic was a magic that creates a ball of water, and it was one of the most basic spells that was commonly learned by toddlers. Since it was quite literally just a water ball, it doesn't hurt much if someone gets hit with it, and even a child could use it safely. That's why it was listed first in the basic magic repertoire. Vold questioned him why he would want to fight with water ball magic since even the kids in elementary school don't use that anymore, and he replied that if they use attack magic in the academy, it would get too noisy and it would be troublesome for him as well. Vold finally agreed to his terms and warned him that he would make him crawl on the ground, while Licht simply stood there, thinking to himself that even though his opponent seemed just like a regular bully, since this was the Royal Academy, it was very much possible that he was surprisingly powerful. However, he was not really worried about him because he knew the power level of people like him all too well. They were always more about talking shit rather than actually moving their bodies, and they could only blindly trust what has been given to them. He had never seen anyone like this who was actually strong, and he was certain this was just another one of those cases. Vold was already finished with creating a water ball, and he bragged about how big of a water ball he had created, saying that only a limited number of regular students could create a water ball of this size. Witnessing the strength of a regular student firsthand, Licht began to understand that with this level of power, it's no wonder they were full of themselves and even believed that they could rest easy no matter who they ran into. Vold heard that and dared him to say that again, but in response, he simply created a small water ball at the tip of his finger. Seeing such a tiny water ball, Vold mocked him even more and started laughing, saying that this was precisely the difference in their talent. He launched his ultimate water ball at him, and the spectators concluded that he had already won this match. But then Licht launched his water ball towards his as well, and the moment it made contact, it completely destroyed Vo's spell, which left him absolutely stunned. He could not believe what he just witnessed, and how come such a tiny water ball destroyed his massive one. The audience was equally shocked, and they started cheering for him, as it was the first time a lower-tier student had defeated a regular student. Vold grew furious, and he told everyone to just shut up. His pride of being a noble and a regular student was not going to allow him to lose to a commoner lower-tier student. He began to agree with what the rumors were saying about him, and he now understood that he was a presence that would disrupt the discipline of the Royal Academy. So he took it upon himself to stop that from happening and eliminate him right there. He unleashed his fire attribute magic, which was actually his specialty, and he planned to turn him into ashes. Just then, someone called him out and told him to stop this nonsense, as the duel had already been settled. Licht turned around, and it was just another fellow student. The boy introduced himself to him as Creed, and it turns out he was also a lower-tier student and a commoner, just like him. Licht bluntly turned him down, saying that he did not need his help, and the boy tried to explain to him that even though he was strong, he should not be underestimating the true powers of a regular student. Vold, on the other hand, was getting fired up because now that there were two of those low-ranking commoners, he had an excuse to go all out without holding back. He was determined to defeat the useless princess's useless knight and gain recognition. Creed was starting to get a little worried, since from the looks of it, he was beginning to lose his sanity, and if that continued, the entire cafeteria could burn down. However, Licht was concerned with something entirely different, and he told Vold to take back what he just said. In the blink of an eye, he closed in on him, grabbed him by his face, and smashed him down onto the floor. He made it very clear that he was absolutely not going to tolerate anyone who insults the queen because he was her knight. That scared the living soul out of Vold, so much that he literally peed his pants. Just then, Jessica came in and stopped both of them. She ordered everyone to behave properly, as this was a place for meals, and told them to just sit down and finish their food if they hadn't eaten yet. As for Licht, she wanted to have a private conversation with him. She took him away and questioned him what the hell he was trying to do back there, to which he replied that, as Arya's knight, he could not just let a pathetic bully like him insult his lady. However, that was not the main issue. She could sense a strong killing intent in his attack back there, and she said to him that such a strong killing intent does not fit well with his age. She asked him if he had killed someone before, and in response, he remained silent. One look at his face, and she understood what a stupid question that was. Besides being chosen as the princess's knight at the age of 15, she could tell he must have overcome various trials, but the point she was trying to make was that this place was a school, and she did not want him to carry everything on his shoulders all by himself. This was a place where he could find future friends who would stay by his side, and she gave him a piece of advice, saying that sometimes it was important to seek help from friends. He turned around and saw Creed waiting for him with a big smile on his face, and that right there proved her point. That was all for now, and she told him to just go back and eat his meal. As he walked back, she thought to herself that because he had such outstanding talent, he would surely make many enemies in this place, but at the same time, there would be those who would admire him and would get attracted to him. She just hoped that he could treasure those people. The scene then shifted to the finance minister of the Ratoclus kingdom, Lancel von Balmung, and while he was in the middle of his training, the butler of the Balmung household came up to him, and he had some news for him. He had recently received a report from the teacher that they had sent to spy on the Royal Academy, and it said that Arya Rose had returned to the academy, which meant that she had successfully defeated the thieves they had sent after her. But that was not all. She was now accompanied with her knight named Licht Icehulk, and according to the reports, he was a skilled swordsman. Balmung had never heard that name before, and if he really was such a skilled swordsman, he wondered why his name was not already well known. The butler further reported that the knight had black hair, black eyes, and he was about 15 years old. But more importantly, he appeared just around the time that a Stark boy was outcasted, and even though the last name was different, the first name was exactly the same, Licht. Balmung finally realized what was going on, and he started laughing hysterically because this mysterious knight was none other than the son of Lord Tetius. The butler pointed out that it was still not confirmed, and in response, he simply told him to confirm it then. Coming back to Licht, some time had passed since that incident in the cafeteria, and he was training with his sword in the campus grounds outside the dorms. As he was doing so, the divine sword said to him that she had been feeling some intense stares towards them for a while now, and it was not just one or two people. He wondered what she meant by that, but then he turned around and was shocked, seeing a bunch of girls staring at him, gossiping how he had gotten quite popular after the cafeteria incident, and they even found him really hot. Turfing just started laughing and stated that even though they had found a very good spot for morning training, they had accidentally stumbled into the girls' dorm backyard, while he, on the other hand, was just starting to get tired of all this attention since all he wanted was to blend into the academy life. Later on, he went to the cafeteria, and he picked up a lot of bread and started eating them quite aggressively, which left everyone a bit weirded out. Creed was one of them as well, and he went up to him, asking him how come he had such a huge appetite this early in the morning. On top of that, he also pointed out the girls that were still staring at him through the windows, and that really surprised him as he had never thought he would see the day when so many girls would swarm this dorm, and the fact that they were all after the newly enrolled Connor boy that really blew his mind. Speaking of unbelievable things, he also brought up that usually Connor students were crammed into a corner of the cafeteria with very strict eating times because of those high-ranking bullies. However, now they could all eat freely wherever they wanted, whenever they wanted, all thanks to him defeating Volg, who, by the way, was also sitting right across them, and he looked very pissed. But of course he now knew that there was nothing he could do against him. Creed then mentioned that regular students like him had always been looked down upon and discriminated against by the regular students, and they had actually gotten used to it. But then came Licht, and even though no one had told him to, he challenged an age-old tradition that people had just accepted without question. He expressed that thanks to his duel, he had made all of them question what they always thought was simply common sense. Lake clarified that he was not fighting the bully with that intention, and Creed said that that might be true. However, the one thing that he was certain of was that with that duel, he had woken everybody up, and he really appreciated that. Just then, a girl came up to him from behind and greeted them both. Lick turned to Creed first and asked him if girls could use this cafeteria as well, to which he answered that they could not since this was just a boys-only cafeteria. She, on the other hand, did not seem to care about that rule, and she noticed how many pieces of bread were on his plate. She guessed that all the other girls must have had the same idea, and of course she was just like them as well, so she showed him the cupcake that was served in the girls' dorm this morning, and she wanted to give that to him. He did not really have any reason to refuse such a generous offer, and he gladly accepted that, while Creed advised him to just go easy on it, otherwise he would upset his stomach. He also explained to the girl that ever since this morning, Licht was getting bombarded with offerings from fellow commoners just like her. Licht was just surprised to hear that she was a commoner as well, and she introduced herself to him as Hannah. Furthermore, she had a confession to make, and she told him that just this morning she saw him in front of her dorm, and she just could not help herself from meeting with him. He paid zero attention to her and simply turned away, while she was feeling really embarrassed, and she apologized to him, saying that she did not mean to intrude at all. What she was really interested in was that divine sword of his, and she asked him if he could let her see every detail of it up close. She was literally drooling by just looking at it. Turfing herself was shocked hearing that she was interested in her. Hannah found the divine sword really pretty, with that pure white maiden adorned in gold. Just one look at it, and she could already tell that it was the divine sword named Turfing. However, she had also heard that the Turfing was the treasured sword of the noble family, Estark from the north, and that made her wonder what it was doing there. Licht was in no mood to answer all that, and he just packed up his stuff, saying that it was almost time for him to pick up the princess. He took his leave from them, and Hannah tried to stop him, asking if she had said something that offended him, but he did not answer and simply walked away. Creed then informed her that she was actually the only one who had approached him this morning, not because of him, but because she was interested in his sword, and that had made her quite intriguing. Later, as Licht was walking through the campus to meet up with Arya, every single woman was turning around and was going head over heels for him. Meanwhile, Turfing was just happy to see that her admirers had already begun to show up, and she considered letting Hannah touch her a little, because after all, she was quite famous and everyone wanted to have a look at her up close. He asked her if she was actually that famous, and she responded that of course she was, since it was the sword of the great hero who pretty much settled the foundation of this whole nation. However, even though that was true, Turfing was also surprised to see that Hannah was able to guess her identity just by looking at her for the first time, and she guessed that she must be very knowledgeable in history. Or maybe she just had a strong attachment to the divine swords. He then finally arrived outside Arya's dorm, and just as he was about to step in through the gates, the divine sword stopped him and reminded him that this was the girls' dorm. He did not see what was the problem there, and she told him that a man should not just casually waltz into the girls' dorm like that. He assured her that he wouldn't look at any of them with ill intentions, but that was not the point she was trying to make, and even though he felt that way, she was sure the girls would not want to be seen by boys in their home. However, he honestly did not care about that, since he had already seen enough of the female species since he was little to even start disliking them, all thanks to his sister Ellen, of course, and with those memories in his mind, he simply believed that women were not creatures who would be shy about such things. Ellen had quite literally changed his perspective on how women feel. However, Arya was also right there by the gate, and she heard everything he had to say. She was already expecting that he would do something like this, and she told him that he should not be entering the girls' dorm like that without permission.